This time in the Iron Empire, we go head to head. Holden Statesman versus Ford Fairlane. Alright guys, so this is something I've wanted to do for a long time now, since I got the Statesman late last year, and obviously for those who know the channel, I've had this Ford Fairlane. Well, it's been in the family for a lot of years. I thought it'd be the perfect opportunity to do a head-to-head of the two same models of Holden and Ford. Okay, so before we go any further, I do have to point out a couple of things. First of all, they're not exactly the same model. This is a 94 VR Statesman, the first of the series, and this is an NL Fairlane, the last of the series. So they're basically one model apart, the same era and the same trim level. The other thing I have to mention is that, yeah, this may be an unfair advantage. I've mainly grown up on Fords, and this has been in the family for over 10 years. Anyway, let's get stuck into it and look at these two awesome cars. Alright guys, so here we are in the Statesman, and yeah, just taking it for a spin. I've been using this on and off for the last few months. Nice enough car to drive. This specific car is driving on a set of lowered king springs, so it is really quite a rough ride, and it's got the IRS in it. Unsure if that's really noticeable in the car, to be honest with you. Probably more of a performance option, I'd say. I'm no suspension expert, but yeah, look, it's a nice enough car to drive, super responsive. This is 5 litre, paired with the LSD that's in this thing. It gets the tyres frying really well and definitely puts you back in your seat when you want it to. Obviously the 5 litres have a distinct note and they do sound really nice. And yeah, overall, cold aircon, leather seats. Yeah, the only thing that I could probably say about this car where it lacks is maybe the fact that it's based on a Commodore length wheelbase. It definitely has not got the same driving sort of comfort as the longer wheelbase Fairlanes. So with that being said, let's jump in the Fairlane and see how that goes. Alright, so cruising in the Fairlane now, and this has always been my first or second most comfortable car. They are just an absolute pleasure to drive. Seating position, seats, I can't speak more highly of how these things are so good to drive, and I've always loved it. Now, admittedly, this thing is now on airbags, and I'm not overly happy with the rear end. I do want to change the shock situation in it. Before this thing was bagged, it was also running on a set of king springs, and I've got to say that it probably did handle it a lot better than the Statesman does. A lot smoother, quieter on the road, and definitely not as bumpy. Now, both of these cars have done about the same Ks, nearing on 300,000 now. So, you know, one may have had a rougher life than the others, so it's not going to be the most true representation, but a pretty close one anyway. So I'm unsure if you can hear in the camera, but it has got a really nice exhaust note. Probably sounds nearly as good as the Statesman, but yeah, like I said, definitely doesn't quite perform the same. All right, so anyway, let's jump out and have a good look around both these cars. They're both around the same trim level. They're not the highest you can get, but they're both pretty much packed with the same features. Both vehicles are running 5 litre V8s. Both have leather, and both were pretty much aimed at the luxury market. Okay, so starting with the Statesman, this is a 5 litre 304 fuel injected. It's got a 4-speed automatic, and it's got an IRS LSD. Now the Fairlane, also a 5 litre injected V8, 4-speed automatic. This has a solid rear end, running on non-LSD. Now I'm going to get straight into the performance side of things. In this era of Aussie vehicles, Holden has to take the cake. they have in this model is a 304 5-litre V8. It's an Australian designed and built motor, and it's pretty burly. For what it is, this thing flies. It fries the tyres, no worries, puts you back in its seat, and has a really distinct, nice exhaust note. The 5-litre in the Fairlane, pretty much gutless in this era. Throughout the 90s and late 80s, right up until they hit the AU, when they started throwing some real performance parts in these Windsors right at the end of their run, they were doughy as almighty hell. This thing only packed 4 more kilowatts than the 6-cylinder of the same model. Now, I don't want to knock Ford too much because it does have an amazing exhaust note. It has plenty of power for basically what it's built for, but in a head-to-head, the Holden is going to blast it every time. All right, so moving on to external styling. Now, obviously this is going to come down to my opinion only, so don't hammer me too hard in the comments. Either agree or disagree. It's not a big deal. In my opinion, the Holden left a little bit on the table with this model. I think they've done a pretty good job of disguising a Holden Commodore, which is essentially what this is. The front end with the remodeled grille and headlight situation looks good. This particular car has got a Caprice grille, which is a lot nicer than the grille that was originally on this vehicle. I must say that they did definitely take a couple of ballsy moves on this car by retaining a straight wheel arch in the back of it right up until the late 90s. And also the full glass around the back window is a pretty bold move for a car of this era. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, I think they pulled it off. I don't think the same styling could have worked on the Ford, but I think they've done the best they could. And overall, it's a pretty clean looking thing. Now moving on to the Fairlane. Now, I'm going to start right up front with the grille. In the NL, it's a whole lot of chrome going on. There's almost too much chrome going on in my opinion. If this had the same mod as the Statesman, it would have an LTD grille on it, which is a bar style grille, which I think would suit the car a hell of a lot better. I think in a head-to-head, the Ford's a little bit more cleaner in the front end, but I think the proportions might be a little bit better in the Holden. Now looking down the side of the Fairlane, you can't help but notice how long this thing is. They extended the wheelbase on the Fairlane for obviously drivability, and it does give it a distinct look. Especially now that I've got this thing nice and low, I do love the side profile of it. Now touching on the ride height, obviously we've got a little bit of an unfair advantage in the overall looks of these two cars, because for those who know the channel, I have airbagged this car, and obviously putting anything on the ground is going to make it look a hell of a lot better. Moving around to the back, obviously it's a similar treatment. They do the whole boot garnish as a tail light joint from side to side, the same as the Statesman. Probably a little bit sleeker in the back end here with the chrome trim in the center. And once again, it comes down to a bit of taste, but overall I probably like the rear end of the Fairlane a little bit better, but I've got to say I do like that wraparound window on the Holden. Not that it would work on this car. Okay, so let's jump inside and check out the trim. Okay, once again starting off with the Holden. As you can see, this particular car was optioned with a leather interior. It has a velour style insert in the door trims with the Holden embossed into it. I have had the roof lining in this vehicle done by Steve at Stitches and Sound. These are common to drop in this model car. Also happened in the Fairlane, that was also fixed. Aside from that, overall the trim has held up pretty well. One of the seats was repaired, which is obviously standard for probably a vehicle of this age, but overall not a bad interior. Other features of this car, as you'd expect of the era, your typical things like electric windows, cruise control, climate control. Unsure what the stereo situation was in this thing, as it's obviously not original anymore, but overall it has more than enough that I need. Now moving on to the Fairlane, similar scenario with the Holden. Typical electric windows, climate control, cruise control. The Fairlane does have probably what I'd say a little bit of a nicer trim color in the cappuccino, and also finished off with the wood grain. This particular car also came standard with a 6-stacker CD player and electric front seats. The Ford have done a better job of making an 80s designed car not look like an 80s designed car. In the Holden, you can still see clear resemblance of the VN Commodore, which came out in the late 80s. In the Ford, this is just a glorified EA Falcon. Once again, come out in the late 80s, but looking at this dash and these trim finishes, you can't tell. This looks like it's up to date with the 90s. So for that reason, I've got to give the points to the Ford for the interior shootout. All right, now let's give these things a summary. Now, I think everyone probably knows where my heart lies with these two cars. I'm not gonna lie, it lies with the Ford. This thing has been in the family since probably about 2007, maybe longer. So there's a bit of sentimental reasons for liking this car, but I gotta say that even before this one come along, out of all my vehicles, I've always liked this as one of the most comfortable cars that I've ever owned. Absolutely awesome to drive, comfort, quiet, it takes the cake. Has to, hands down, one-on-one comfort, 100% with the Ford. The last thing I will mention is value, as in bang for your buck. Now this could go two ways. The Ford could get the points in this scenario, or the Holden, depends on if you have one and want to sell, or if you don't have one and you want to buy. I've always found that you usually get a bit more bang for your buck in a Ford. They don't tend to retain the same value unless you're talking about 70s muscle cars. So for instance, this car in this sort of condition, you'd probably pick up something like this, maybe around 5 grand, maybe give or take depending on the case. The Holden on the other hand is probably close to double that, maybe more. So if you've got one and you're looking to sell, you're probably better off with the Holden. But if you're looking to get into the market and you're not fussed which way you go, you're probably better off looking for Fords. All right, so that is going to be a wrap on the head-to-head shootout between the Ford and the Holden. I hope it wasn't too much talking for you all. It was definitely too much talking for me, but I thought it was just something fun to do, seeing as I own these both cars at the same time, and why not? Hope you all enjoyed it. All right, if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, let us know what you think of these two awesome cars, and I will see you all next time on the Iron Empire. Cheers, guys.